Welcome to Making Clothes with Character Creator 3 GoZ. For this tutorial, I'll start off with the character from the Making of Joe Lightning tutorial series. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend that you watch it to understand the GoZ workflow with Character Creator 3. Okay, let's get started by reviewing the main concept drawing for this character. This way, we can establish a direction for the clothing style. One of the main things we have to focus on is the partitioning of the clothing. So what I mean is how the costume should be separated into pieces. Take this Muay Thai costume as an example. We'll need to isolate the shorts as one piece of geometry. The hand wraps makes another set, and the foot wraps as another. Now, with the character loaded in Character Creator, I'll just press this GoZ button. Make sure the template is set to create, and you can choose to export other body parts as separate meshes. For this demo, I'll leave everything unchecked because I can derive the clothing based on the mesh of the body alone. ZBrush should automatically open and just drag out the character on an empty canvas. Now, first thing you'll notice is that the brush size is extremely small. This is because Character Creator is based in real-world units where characters are usually close to 1 3/4 meters tall. So let's just configure the brush size settings under the Preferences menu. Under the Draw options, just increase the max brush size all the way up. I also like to change the dynamic brush scale to 10. Now the brush is at a reasonable size for the character of this scale. Take a look at the subtools and you'll notice that Character Creator exports two meshes. One is the tongue and the other is the body of the character. This is under the condition that no other mesh is checked in the Export Options menu. Now, let's begin to make the shorts. You may find it easier to start off at one more subdivision level on the base mesh, or you can choose to work off of the base level subdivision. It really depends on the mesh resolution you're going for. So I'll just mask out an area of the shorts by pressing Ctrl and drag out a rectangle. Next, I'll perform extract from under the subtool menu. When you click on this button, the mesh extraction is actually just providing you a preview. Under the current settings, the extraction will be too thick. So I'm going to dial this down to about 5 millimeters in thickness. And hit this Accept button to make the actual extraction mesh. Clear out the mask and then we can make corrections to this base mesh. The first thing I like to do is change the standard brush to the move brush. Let's make sure that brush mirroring is on, and focus on the edges of the garment. Now I can switch back to the standard brush and sculpt away. A common problem with making clothes this way is that the shape follows the contours of the body too closely, so I recommend sculpting some of the natural bagginess of the clothing into the model. And now I'll just repeat the process for the hand wraps. Make sure that the mirror mode is on and just hold down the Control key to draw out a mask on the body part. It is very important that you spin the model around and preview the extraction result. If you miss a spot or you have accidentally added other portions of the mesh, then you might have to start all over again. This is because the extraction includes the bevel edges, which will be hard to fix if the contours of the extraction is not correct to begin with. Now that's looking good, I'll accept this extraction mesh. And just like the shorts, I'll first fix the outlining shape. Now I'll work on sculpting it, mainly to smooth out areas that hug the base body too tightly. Let's move on to the foot wraps. Same as before, for the hand wraps, the procedure can be repeated. Notice that it has a portion of the mesh jutting out on the top. Simply subtract the mask in that area and try again. Another problem are the holes near the ankle. Simply add to the mask for that area and preview the extraction again. It's important to keep spinning the model around and fixing the extraction mask as you go. Getting the mask perfect at this stage will save you a lot of trouble later on. Let's finalize extraction because it's looking pretty good. And like before, we can continue to fix the basic geometry. Now when all the extractions are ready, you can subdivide the pieces even further and sculpt in the details. Just go to every piece, subdivide, and refine the geometry. Okay, let's jump forward to the finished product. We have the finished hand wraps, the boxing trunks, and finally the feet wraps. Now, I'll show you how I do the UV unwrapping right inside ZBrush, which should save you a lot of time by not having to hop between another application. But first, I'll just go to the Z plugin menu and drag from the top left corner icon to the right docking menu. This way I can easily access UV Master without it contracting all the while. First, let's make sure one piece of the garment is selected and go to the lowest subdivision. Then I'll activate the Work on Clone function to branch off the trunks into its own tool. One thing to keep in mind is that ZBrush won't allow you to work on the UVs of a mesh that already has subdivisions. This is to safeguard work you might have done for the higher level subdivisions. Now I'll just click on this Unwrap button to let UV Master automatically calculate the UVs. Then press this Flatten button to see the UV layout. It's not a bad UV layout overall, but the way the front and back of the trunks is separated into two UV islands can cause issues with the UV seams on the sides of the shorts. So let's see how we can go about unifying the two islands and pushing the seams to the back of the trunks. Let's enable control painting and add a UV seam by using the Attract tool. Now switch to the Protect tool to prevent UV seams from forming on the sides of this trunks. I can simply paint in broad swaths to prevent the UVs from splitting in those areas of the mesh. Press the Unwrap tool to recalculate UVs according to the newly painted parameters. Flatten the model again to check if the UVs are correct. In this case, the UVs are correctly unified into one big UV island. So let's just copy the UVs. Go back to the original character tool and paste it onto the shorts. And that's how you can UV unwrap right inside ZBrush. It's a pretty fast and efficient process. It just takes a bit of getting used to if you're doing it for the first time. Let's unhook the ZBrush menu by dragging it out in the empty area of the canvas to get it out of the way. So now let's move on to the poly painting to create the diffuse map for the shorts. The first thing we'll have to do is make sure that Colorize is enabled under the Polypaint menu. Let's select the base color for the trunks, and under the Color menu, fill the entire object with this color. I think I'll go with a darker color instead. Now I'll just subdivide the mesh to the highest level. Because polypainting works by coloring the individual faces of a geometry, we'll need to recruit as much face density as possible to increase the resolution for polypainting. So now, I can select a different color and start painting directly on the shorts. Okay, let's skip forward to a point where the poly painting is finished. Now we can proceed to generate the texture maps, and you can determine the resolution of the texture map generation under the UV map menu. Usually, ZBrush will default to 2048 by 2048. Choose a resolution that is right for your project. Just remember that it's trivial to scale down an image, but it can be a hassle to scale it up and keep it looking good. Under the texture map menu, I'll just click on the New from Polypaint button. This will bake the poly paint to a texture map, and we'll use this texture map as a diffuse and base color map back in Character Creator. I'm going to disable poly paint for now and min out the subdivision level for the shorts. Now I can generate the normals under the normal map menu. But notice that the convex areas of the map look depressed. This is because by default ZBrush bakes the normal maps in DirectX mode. Since Character Creator is OpenGL, we'll need to flip G in order to get the right normals tangent. Armed with both diffuse and normal maps, I can press this GoZ button to go back into Character Creator. Make sure that the action template is set to Update Mesh plus Texture. And that's how we can bring in articles of clothing from ZBrush. However, we'll need to generate one more texture map for the ambient occlusion channel separately. This is because GoZ has no way to automatically bring in AO maps. Back in ZBrush, just max out the subdivision of the mesh, and perform Mask by Ambient Occlusion under the Masking menu. Now press the New from Masking function under the Texture Map menu to generate the AO map. Clone this texture and export from the Texture menu. You can simply drag and drop this AO map back into Character Creator. Let's take a look at the final costume with all the maps applied. So we have the diffuse, normal, and ambient occlusion map for each article of clothing. When a mesh is first brought into Character Creator from ZBrush, it is categorized as an accessory. And when we apply a test pose, it becomes very apparent that the skin weights are inadequate. In order to appropriately skin the articles of clothing to the body, we'll need to use the Transfer Skin Weights tool in the Modify panel. Just go ahead and apply the skin weights. Now for the trunks. And now for the foot wraps. Except this time I'll pick the shoes template. So let's try out various poses once again. Looks fine for the most part except for the gloves. This is most likely due to the deployment of an incorrect skin template. Let's transfer skin weights once more. This time I'll select the gloves template. And that fixes some of the issues, but we still have mesh penetration. In this case, we'll have to modify the geometry directly. Let's load the T-pose first. Now under the Edit Mesh mode, we'll just select the vertex points directly and modify the shape of the mesh. In conjunction with soft selection, this can be a very effective method for fixing mesh penetration or stray vertices. Okay, great. Let's test a few more poses. And everything is looking pretty good. One more thing I should mention. These sets of clothing are completely transferable between characters of the same generation. Since Joe was made with CC3 base character, I can also dress up another CC3 character with the clothes in the scene. We do this by saving to the custom category for every article of clothing. Like this pants, I'll browse to the clothing category, then the pants subcategory, and make sure to switch to the custom tab. Press the plus button below and give it a name. Likewise, I'll do this for the hand wraps and foot wraps. I suggest you pick names that make it easy to identify the article of clothing. Otherwise, your custom content library may be hard to manage when it gets really cluttered. Now let's load up a default character to test the clothes that we have saved. Make sure to select the same generation character that the clothing was made for. Simply double-click on the custom clothing to apply. It's not looking bad at all. However, you may come across some minor mesh penetration, especially if the original model for the clothing is extremely exaggerated. Fix this by accessing the Conform menu in the Modify panel, and simply press the Calculate Collision button. Now the Muay Thai trunks fit perfectly. That's the end of this tutorial on making clothes with Character Creator 3 GoZ. Thanks for watching.